finally got my hands on the Tecno Spark 8P, and for an entry-level device, Tecno has really outdone themselves here. Out of the box, I was really impressed by the textured finish because some device manufacturers are leaning more and more into glossy, fingerprint attracting casings. Tecno didn't get full marks totally in this category because the camera bump has a glossy finish, but it's pretty easy to avoid touching it. Before we go any further, I think it's important to stress that the Spark 8P is still in the realm of very cheap smartphones, or relatively cheap smartphones. The 64GB version starts at around $155, while the 128 version is going for about $185. So if you're expecting face-melting performance and display, this sadly is not that kind of device. However, what the device itself packs for the price point is still pretty impressive. So, first impressions, more of a part 2 because I kind of covered that in the intro, but you might be deceived that this is an entry-level device. I have to hand it to Tecno for constantly improving the design and to some degree the build quality. It doesn't feel like the flimsy device of yesteryear. Just feeling it around, it's quite solid and well put together. The Tecno Spark 8P has, in my opinion, an ergonomic button layout. You have the volume controls on the right side of the device with a side-mounted fingerprint scanner. This is really good because it's a departure from devices that have a rear-mounted fingerprint scanner, but not as good as devices with an in-display fingerprint scanner. That aside, it has a dual SIM tray on the left side of the device with an SD card slot that has a gasket. Now, the addition of the gasket kind of took me aback because it kind of feels like Tecno is trying to waterproof the device or give it some sort of water resistance. But to be honest, I wouldn't be taking this phone for a dip anytime soon. At the bottom of the device, the Tecno Spark 8P has a micro USB port, a mono speaker, 3.5mm headphone jack, and the microphone. So specs, the Spark 8P has a 6.6-inch screen. There are 64GB, 128GB, and 256GB variants. Locally, I've only seen the 64GB and the 128GB variants. Across the board, all of them have 4GB of RAM. In terms of processor, they have a MediaTek MT6769V Helio G70 processor running iOS 7.6, which is based on Android 11. The device I tested was on Android 11, and I hope there's an Android 12 update, but that is still up in the air. Camera-wise, it has a 50MP main camera, 2MP portrait, and an AI lens making up a triple rear camera module. The Spark 8P has an 8MP selfie cam, and interestingly enough, there's a flash on both the rear and front-facing cameras. Maybe this is Tecno's way of trying to say take more pictures or breaking the mold of other smartphone manufacturers, but I think it's an interesting touch. Battery-wise, as anyone really cares about devices like this is concerned, it's got a 5000 mAh battery. So how did the Tecno Spark 8P perform? Well, to be honest, it did really well with operations in its weight class. If you want to surf the web, watch videos on YouTube, Netflix, you won't have much of an issue. By the time I had the device, there weren't very many hiccups when it came to simple tasks. YouTube playback and video playback was pleasant enough on the 1080p display. What I really had the issue with was audio playback. The mono speaker on the bottom is not the best. The audio is very bad in the low ends and very tinny. This won't stop people from using it on loudspeaker, especially for calls, but I think this is where the 3.5mm headphone jack comes in handy. The audio playback was a lot better in the headphones than it was on loudspeaker. When it comes to gaming and other stuff, it doesn't really handle heavy gaming really well or the heavier titles. You'll need to use conservative settings or not use them at all. But for the run-of-the-mill games like I was testing out, it did alright. Like there was no hiccup, it didn't lag, it was pretty well, even when switching from app to app. I was pretty impressed with the performance. Battery-wise, the Spark 8P did well, to be honest. In the endurance test, it stood up to video playback and gaming. I lost about 20%, alternating between gaming and watching videos for about half an hour or so, which isn't actually too bad. Moving into software and the user interface, I was really impressed with iOS. I mean, for the price point, the device ran pretty smoothly, and I like the little stretch animation when you go beyond the limits of the menu. I wasn't expecting that. It's really a budget phone, but it was a nice little touch. And even animations as set at the out-of-the-box specifications, I didn't experience too much lag. There was one instance I remember though, when I was closing multiple apps and the phone kind of stuttered, but it wasn't too dramatic. The only gripe I have with the Tecno Spark range of phones are the preloaded apps. They send a lot of notifications and they are incessant. So if you are buying the Spark 8P, I strongly suggest you uninstall or mute the notifications for these apps because they will keep coming and very often. Moving on to the camera, and the Spark 8P essentially has one camera, the 50MP main camera. The other two just kind of aid things along. And while using it for a little bit, I can say it wasn't really meant for low light. Daylight wise, it'll do very well, but in low light, it's very grainy. Image quality is possible. I mean, if you're using it for social media and just random photo taking, yeah, it'll do pretty well. So, final thoughts and verdict. For what you're getting, between $155 to $185, the Spark 8P is a really competent device. It wasn't really designed to handle heavy gaming and massive amounts of operations. It's more suited to being a basic function daily driver. So this is more suited for people who are just entering the smartphone market or bridging the divide between feature phones to smartphones. Alternatively, if you already have a high-end phone, this is a really good backup or a burner phone.